Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you on this beautiful Sunday morning. This morning, I'm going to give a talk that I've titled The Sora, and I'll spell that. It's S-O-R-A, and a Sora is a kind of bird. So back in April, or maybe it was early May, I had heard, I'll say reports, I don't know, a better way to put it, but I'd heard that somebody had spotted a Sora at a local park. And I just want to show you what a Sora is. So just give me one moment. I'm going to do a little share screen here. So that's a Sora. It's roughly a chicken-sized bird, and it lives in marshes. It's a rail, actually, and it's a secretive bird, rarely seen. People do see them, but they're not seen like you would see, say, robins or something like that. You can see by looking at it, it's kind of beautiful. It's got that soft brown to it, and the colorings on it almost look like they're painted. It looks like a painted egg to me in some way. And that bottom part of the bird is a light gray color, and it has a striking yellow beak. And so that's a Sora, and I'd heard that somebody had seen one at a local park, and it's a park that's so close to me that I can walk to it fairly easily. And especially in lockdown, I've noticed I've been doing more walking and more bicycle riding than I have in the past. Not that I didn't do that stuff, but I seem to be doing it more than ever before. And so I thought I would go look for these birds because they're kind of hard to find. And the thing that's interesting about them is even though they're sort of a secretive bird, they're also the most populous rail, that's the kind of bird it is, in North America. So they're a very common bird, and yet they're not one that's seen too often. They're heard more often than they're seen. So anyhow, since that park was nearby and somebody had seen it there, whenever I would go to the park, I would look for them. In fact, I would sometimes orchestrate ways in which I could go to the park. So it'd be sort of like, well, I'm going to go for a walk today. Why don't we go to Veterans Park? That might be a fun park to go to. And of course, I'd bring my binoculars with me. And I would look for the Sora. And I spent a lot of time just sort of scanning the marshy areas of that park with binoculars, just looking to see if I could see this bird. And this went on for months. And then I finally just decided, since I didn't know much about Soras, actually, I just thought, they probably were here for the spring and they're gone. So I'm not going to see it. So after months of looking for this thing and really taking a lot of time going through the park looking for this bird, I just gave up. I just thought, I'm not going to see these things. So I give up. All right. Then just a few weeks ago, I was at a different park, one that's along the Minnesota River. It's actually a nature reserve. And as I was crossing a marshy lake that's there, it's called Long Meadow Lake, I heard some peeps coming from, there was a lot of peeps actually coming from some grass. And I thought that I would just look and see if we could see what it was that was peeping. I had no idea what it was, but mainly just looking at the beauty of the grass. There's something about the grass that grows down in this valley that I've never really seen grass like it. The leaves get really quite large, as do the seeds. And so I was just sort of admiring the grass, and I just happened to look down, and I saw this little bird, this beautifully marked bird. And, at first I went, what on earth is that? It looked like it was some kind of duck or something scrabbling around in the weeds. And then I eventually realized, I went, oh, I bet this is a Sora. But I didn't know for sure because it had been a while since I'd looked at a picture of one. So I had to kind of keep it in the back of my head as we were walking around. And when I got back to the car, I got my phone out and I looked it up, and sure enough, there was the Sora. So I'm telling this story because it seems to me that in that story, much of human endeavor actually gets described by what it was that I experienced anyhow when I was looking for the Sora. And that is, we might have a sense that something is missing, something that we desire, that we want, maybe even something that we feel we need is missing. It's not here. and we go out and we look for it. And then when we do that, our reality seems to be almost in a way made in the shape of the thing that's not there. Our reality is very colored by, shaped by the thing that we think is missing. I can't say that it necessarily becomes an obsession for us, but depending on our personalities, it might be an obsession for us. It's something we really need to get this thing. And then it seems like that thing we really need to get, just like me with the Sora, the harder that we look for it, the more it seems to elude us. I mean, I was really scouring the marsh in that park to find that Sora, with my binocular, just looking down at what to my eyes clearly looked like just mud and grass. And I was, scouring for it. It just seems like the harder we look for something, the more that eludes us. And we can just think of like an everyday example. I assume a lot of you have this experience that at least I know other people I know do. And that is you're at home and perhaps you need to go pick something up and you start looking for your car keys or your glasses and you go, well, where are my glasses? And then you start, first thing you do is you look in the logical places, right? So you go, okay, I always keep my car keys on the dresser, and you go to the dresser and they're not there. You go, okay, well, sometimes I leave them on my desk, and you go and you look there. Then you look at the other place you might leave the car keys. And then, if you're like me anyhow, then you start doing a little quick dance between the three obvious places thinking, well, it's gotta be right here. It's gotta be in one of these three places. That's the only place it could be. And then when you've done that cycle a couple times, then it's, okay, it's not there. So where on earth are they? And then you might start looking in like, well, I was in the living room. Maybe I set them down there. And then you add to the places that it has to be. And then perhaps finally what you do is you put your hand in your pocket and you realize that there the car keys are, right there in your pocket. So it does seem like the harder we look for something, the more it eludes us. I've had something where I'd say, look for a book. And, I might have like 4 books in a pile on my desk, books that I've been going through to maybe write a talk or something. And I'll look in those 4 books for that book over and over and over again, and then find eventually that it's one of the 4 books in that pile. Somehow, no matter how often I looked at, I just was eluding my sight. So the harder we look for something, the more it eludes us. We can think of perhaps something like happiness. I think a lot of people pursue happiness. There is a happiness industry. You just go type happiness on Google and see what shows up. And you'll see a lot of seminars and books and things of that nature. Perhaps awareness or enlightenment is one of those things that you feel is missing, and you go looking for it and looking for it, and you can't find it. And it seems that the more you look for it, the more you look for happiness, the more you look for enlightenment, it just seems not to be there. And then you may say to yourself, well, okay, Steve, fine, but looking for glasses and looking for happiness, they're not the same thing. Looking for glasses and looking for enlightenment, they're not the same thing. But I would say, at least the way we're treating it at this moment, they're actually far more similar than you might think. The way that we're taking this up, the way that we're thinking about happiness, or the way we're thinking about enlightenment, is the same way we're thinking about our keys. Now, we just think they're different. We might believe that they have different stakes. And the reason we might believe that is that perhaps we have set aside our glasses, or we've set aside our keys, and then we have finally found them. And it just doesn't seem like much changed for us in having found the object that we're lost. Whereas we look at happiness, we look at enlightenment. If I get that, things are going to change for me. And again, I want to at least encourage you to think about, if they really are similar, the way that you're pursuing them is the finding the thing that you think you're trying to get. Is that going to be no more different than just finally finding those keys? And it really didn't make much of a difference. It allowed you to drive someplace, and that's about it. So the reason that it becomes similar, that pursuing happiness or pursuing enlightenment can be like looking for our glasses or our keys is because we make something out of them. We make a thing out of enlightenment. Perhaps, again, we look at our life and we feel some sense of dissatisfaction, or we feel that something's off. We're experiencing pain, and we think, well, enlightenment, or whatever term it is that you use that might help assuage that feeling, that's the thing I want. And of course, once you've taken enlightenment and you've made a thing out of it, quite naturally, it's going to be missing. And I say quite naturally it's going to be missing because enlightenment is not a thing. It's not a thing. But once we've made it into a thing, now we're not going to have it. Now we don't have it. So now we find ourselves chasing after it. And we might devote a lot of our life to chasing after it. Again, depending on what I'm calling enlightenment, you might call it peace of mind. You might call it seeing truth, or becoming one with God. Or I don't know what term you would use, but we chase after that, and we might do so quite diligently. It might take up years of our lives. And so we do things in order to try to get this thing that's missing. Perhaps we sit zazen. If I sit zazen long enough, this thing called enlightenment, I'm finally going to get it. So we've done the same thing now that we've done at the car keys. It's a thing. Enlightenment is something, and you're going to keep looking in the same places for it over and over and over again. Keep sitting on that meditation cushion. I'm not sitting on the meditation cushion properly, or maybe I'm not doing this meditation practice properly, so I'll do it different. I'll take up a different kind of meditation, and that will give me the thing that I want. And of course, what we're missing with this peace of mind or enlightenment or whatever we might call it is it's right here, right now. And we overlook that. And we overlook that in part so easily because we get caught up in things. Just like we're doing with enlightenment, we made a thing out of it. In a way, we're caught up in that sense of thingness that we've attributed to enlightenment. And we get caught up in the thingness of the appearances of this world. That's where we overlook reality. We look at these things and we ascribe to them a kind of truth, a kind of reality that they don't have, but that we deeply believe in our heart, is true. I say deeply believe in our heart. It's actually our conceptualization. So I don't know how deep in our heart it goes, but we would argue very strongly, perhaps, that these things are reality. And by that, we mean something very different than what a Zen master or an awakened one might refer to as reality. So we get caught up in these things. These things seem to be reality to us. We take the things that appear, that seem to come and go, we take those as having some kind of reality that they don't. And I wanted to share with you this morning a koan that actually points to this, to how it is that we overlook enlightenment. We overlook the true nature of reality by getting caught up in appearances. And it's not that the appearances don't have reality, but again, we take the appearances as being true nature, right? And they are, but not in the way that we think that they are. This koan that I want to share with you is titled Baijing's Wild Ducks. And it was only after I started thinking about the koan that I realized it's another bird reference. It wasn't actually my intention. It was a moment in this koan that I wanted to really kind of zero in on. So let me just read to you the koan, and then I'll talk about it briefly. So once, when Grandmaster Matsu and Baijing were walking together, they saw some wild ducks fly by. The great master asked, "What is that?" Baijing said, "Wild ducks." The great master said, "Where have they gone?" Baijing said, "They've flown away." The great master then twisted Baijing's nose. Baijing cried out in pain. The great master said, "When have they ever flown away?" So that's our story. We have these ducks flying by. We have a teacher and a student, Matsu and Baijing himself. The student here went on to become a great master himself. And Matsu asked Baijing, when wild ducks fly by, he says, "What is that?" Now, I don't know if this is just the translation. It could be. I didn't look at a number of translations. I just looked at the Thomas Cleary translation that's in that big blue book, if people know what that is, of the Blue Cliff Record. But it strikes me as really interesting that when wild ducks, and this is in the plural, fly by, that what Matsu asks is, "What is that?" He doesn't ask, "What are those?" And that seems to me to be an important distinction. What is that? These ducks fly by, what is that? Not what are those? And then we have Baijing's answer. So after Master asks, "What is that?" So he's asking in some question. Now, in some sense here, we have a dialogue between a master and a student. And the master is asking the student, "What is that?" And this is, when you have koans, and these are often teaching stories, and these koans are pointing toward reality. When a master asks a student something that looks like it has this really simple answer to it, one at least wants to, I don't want to say pause, but that simple answer, well, I don't want to say that it's going to be wrong, because it might not be, and we'll talk about that in a second. But when a master is asking this question, "What is that?" usually he's trying to sound out some understanding of what it is that's taking place right here. So when he asks, "What is that?" Baijing says, "Wild ducks." Now that's an interesting answer, because in a way, not even in a way, it would just say true enough. What is that? Wild ducks. What is the nature of reality? We have a variety of koans where a teacher says something like the oak tree in the front yard, or 3 pounds of flax. So what is that? What is that showing up? It's wild ducks right there, true enough. And it's possible that had Baijing answered original face, our original nature, maybe Matsu would have just twisted his nose right there, brought him right back down to what it is that's taking place here. It's hard to say. I remember a story, I don't remember if it was from John Tarrant, but I think it might have been. And he talked about the fact that he'd been at a retreat, and at this retreat, he wasn't going to be able to have a private meeting with the teacher, and the teacher there was a person he really wanted to talk to and ask some questions to, but just something about the way the retreat was set up, he wasn't eligible to ask questions, but he got to be the assistant for this teacher, and he thought, "Oh, this is perfect, because what I'll do is I'll ask my question, and what I think if I remember the story correctly, what he wanted to do was kind of show off his understanding to this teacher." And so he thought, "Well, I'll have an opportunity to do that, during my assistance of the senior teacher." And it was right at the end of the retreat, and the master was returning, he was going to the curb to pick up a taxi to return to where he'd come from, basically. And whoever this was, we'll just say it was John Tarrant, I don't remember for sure, but he grabs all the bags of the master and they're going out. And the master kind of looks down and he sees some flowers and he goes, "What are those?" And John Tarrant says, "Oh, it's an expression of totality." And he did this whole, Dharma talk or whatever. And the teacher kind of looks surprised. He goes, "Well, that's fine, but I really just wondered what kind of flowers those were." So perhaps if Baijing had answered something like, "What is that?" And he said some sort of flowery answer, he might have had his nose tweaked right there. Because our practice is not to deny the phenomenal world. So before I was saying we get caught up in things and we ascribe them a truth they don't have. They have a truth as appearances, as what's showing up. They have truth. So we cannot deny that. So what is that? Wild ducks. Well, that's what it is. That is, what's showing up. Now, we don't want to mistake the phenomenal world for what it isn't, though. So in saying wild ducks, Baijing still, it's perhaps a bit unclear what it is he's actually pointing to, because the way most of us see wild ducks and the way the awakened see wild ducks are different. At least the way the awakened understand what it is they're seeing is different. So when we say wild duck, often we just mean that's wild ducks, whereas a Zen teacher might understand that differently. And so Matsu asked that follow-up question then, after Baijing points out that, what is that? Wild ducks. Well, then he asked the question, where have they gone? And again, this is an interesting question, because it's in a way, it's a limited question. So the first question was, what is that? Which seemed to me that was inviting, not a sort of limited way of talking about what was showing up. Now we seem to be asking a question that has a limited nature to it. In other words, it requires a perspective. Where have they gone? So for Baijing, where they have gone is probably going to be different from what the ducks would say if they could tell you where they have. The duck might say, what do you mean, where have I gone? I'm right here. Whereas Baijing might say, well, well, we'll see what he has to say. So it's a limited question in that now we can kind of, in a way, get to see what it is that Baijing is actually expressing. How does he understand what it is that Matsu is asking him? Is he going to answer from that limited perspective? Is he going to see that open boundlessness that Matsu is trying to point to, even with his questions? And indeed, what Baijing says is they've flown away. They've flown away. And of course, that then becomes our limited answer. They're not here. They've flown away. They're gone. And Matsu just brings them right back here now with a twist of the nose. So remember when the birds were, what is that? What is that? You could say 3 pounds of flax. You could say the oak tree in the front yard. You could say wild ducks right there, right now. And say there. I'll say here, right now. That's what's showing up. But now, where have they gone? And phenomenal reality seems to come and seems to go. Seems to come and seems to go. The nature of enlightenment is it's always here. Of course, when I say it's always here, it has built into language itself a sense that enlightenment isn't it, and it is. And once we do that, we kind of start to make a thing out of enlightenment, which isn't really what's being pointed out here. It's just a trick of language that we at least have to be aware of. It's not that language is wrong that way. It's just we have to understand that's how language functions, and we have to see that for what it is. So when I say enlightenment is always here, it's just thus. This experience, this is enlightenment. It's not going anywhere, right? So what is that? Wild ducks. Okay, so now Matsu presses further. Where have they gone? Flown away. Well, reality doesn't flow away. Enlightenment doesn't flow away. It's right here. So Matsu brings him right back here by twisting his nose. And right here, this is reality. So this is similar to when Zen masters do other things, strike students. And it seems to us very, aggressive. Geez, the guy got the answer wrong and then the teacher smacks him. And that's not what the teachers are doing. They're always just bringing the students back here, right now, to this moment. So he twists his nose. This is reality. And the rest is conceptualization. So then after Matsu twists Baijing's nose, he says, when have they ever flown away? When we see their true nature, when we see the true nature of wild ducks, where could they fly away to? True nature, reality is always here. It's always now. It's always available to us. Just a simple twist of the nose. It doesn't take much. For some Zen masters, stubbing their toe brings them back here. The sound of a pebble hitting bamboo brings them back here. It's just right here. It doesn't require any conjecture. Where have they flown to? At least Baijing didn't go, well, because this is an answer I would have probably had. Well, that particular kind of duck, they wintered down in the Gulf of Mexico. So my guess is that where they're going, he doesn't do, at least he doesn't do that. But what reality is doesn't require any conjecture. It's just right here. It doesn't require any hunt. It doesn't require any searching. We go searching for those car keys. We go looking for that Sora. We don't need to do that. And so in my story, what happened was when I stopped looking for that Sora, when I had really truly given up looking for it, I honestly was no longer even thinking of Soras at that point. Because I'll tell you why not. I conceptualized. And I thought, well, they're not around anymore. And that's why I'm not seeing them. I just I blamed it on nature. I just went, well, they're not around anymore. So that's why I'm not seeing it. But when I stopped looking, when I stopped even, when I first gave up, it was sort of like, well, I'm going to give up, but in the back of your mind, you go, maybe I'll see a Sora today. Maybe I'll see a Sora today. But when I completely gave up looking for Sora, and I was just looking at the beauty of the grass, and I just happened to see movement. I heard the cheeping of the birds, but I didn't know what they were. And I was interested. That's what caught my attention. And I kind of looked at the birds, but I actually get caught in the beauty of the grass. And that's when I saw the movement of the bird. And that's when the Sora appeared. But I do want to say that the Sora only appeared because conditions were such that Sora would appear. In other words, I wasn't downtown Minneapolis walking on the city streets. The odds that you're going to find a Sora strutting down downtown Minneapolis city street is very unlikely. I wasn't in the middle of a desert, and it wasn't the middle of winter. None of those are conditions in which Sora would appear. Reality appears as conditioned things. That's how it appears, as conditioned things. And they can't be separated from those conditions. So Sora can't be separated from when I saw that bird and where I saw that bird. Those are the conditions in which Sora appears. It's like Steve talks about in Buddhism Plain and Simple when he talks about a puma on a mountain, and how if you remove that puma from the mountain and put it in a zoo, it's no longer puma. Puma is the conditions by which puma appears. When you take it out of that circumstance, this is the way we treat everything. We go, puma, oh, that's that thing. Sora, that's that thing. I can take that out of there, and I can take the Sora and put it in a zoo, or I can take the puma and put it in a zoo. But then you no longer have puma. And I think you've probably seen this if you've gone to zoos and you've watched the animals there, and you realize something seems to be missing. I mean, they seem to be bored out of their gourds, right? So, but something seems to be missing. What you're looking at when you see a puma in a zoo, I call a Zuma. I called it that before we started using Zoom as a communications tool, but a Zuma, right? It's not a puma. It's no longer that totality that showed up as puma. Now it's the totality that's showing up as that cat in an enclosure. It's a Zuma. It has its own reality that doesn't seem to be as alive as the puma does. But we think we can take that bird. We think that that bird is somehow separable, that it's a thing. And then we can do whatever we want with it. And to do that, to believe that, that's to mistake what it is that we're seeing. That is to ascribe to some object that we've identified as an object, sort of an independence from reality. It's something that can be removed and taken and moved around and manipulated in various ways. And when we do that, when that is how we see reality, then we are missing out on reality. That's how we overlook enlightenment. Is we're so caught up in our buying into these things, and then perhaps imagining what we can do with these things. Oh, enlightenment. Oh, once I get that, this is what's going to happen. Or happiness. Once I get that, this is the way things are going to be. And we miss reality as it's unfolding. So one thing I didn't share with you is when I was looking for the Sora, reality kept revealing itself to me. And I want to share a couple stories about that with you as well. So here I was looking for my Sora. And one day when I did that, I saw some birds flying sort of at a distance, and they were ducks, and they landed in the water. And when I saw them, I thought, oh, those look like wood ducks. And in the park that I go to, by the way, are a very beautiful kind of duck. Again, I talked about how the Sora's feathers look like they're almost painted. A wood duck is the same way. It has beautiful coloring to it. I should have pulled up a picture of a wood duck so I could show you, but because I have other pictures I want to show you. So anyhow, I looked at it, I just went, oh, it's wood ducks, and I didn't think anything of it. And then just as a whim, I just pulled my binoculars up. If I remember correctly, I just thought, well, you know, it's just a wood duck, but they're pretty birds. I'll take a look at a wood duck. And so when I focused on the wood duck that was landing, what I actually saw was this, which is not a wood duck. It's something called a northern shoveler. And a northern shoveler, I had just been telling somebody like the day before, you know, I've never seen this duck called a northern shoveler. I really wish I'd see one of those, but I never spent a lot of time looking for one because I've never seen one. I've never seen that people saw that they were seeing them in the park that I was going to. And so there I was just telling myself, well, this is just a wood duck. And look at that. There's reality for sharing itself, you know, revealing itself as wood duck, you know, appearing as wood duck. And I dismissed that at first. You know, it's got wood duck. I've seen those, been there, done that. And I'm already dismissing reality. I'm already overlooking the bountifulness that is reality, how it shows up, you know, as these appearances. And then I look through the binoculars, and there it is. Reality's munificence again, just showing itself again, just very simply in seeing that shoveler. So reality, you know, revealed itself to me, or kept giving to me in the form of that duck while I was looking for my Sora. And when I was looking for Sora another day, I was just happened to be looking at some empty trees. They were right across from where I was, and so I was just kind of getting my binoculars and focused, looking at empty trees. They're just empty trees. And to my surprise, once I actually just looked at what I thought was going to be an empty tree, I saw one of these, which is called a black-crowned night heron. What a striking bird, just sitting on a tree that I thought was empty. I got my binoculars out, and again, I was dismissing. I was just sort of scanning, thinking I was going to maybe see some little bird over there, but I was dismissing the trees as empty, and there was this thing that once I saw it, I took the binoculars and I went away, and I went, how did I not see that bird was there? And I put the binoculars back up and I looked, and then I scanned around, and I saw another one, and I saw another one, and I saw another one, and there were 5 black-crowned night herons sitting within a small space of one another. And again, these aren't birds you see too often. So their reality again, showing itself to me. I'm looking for Sora. But as we're perhaps going through our daily lives, doing the things that we normally do, we can just be attentive to, be aware, be open to what it is that reality is actually sharing with us. Reality is always sharing with us. So it wasn't revealing itself to me as Sora, but it was revealing itself to me as this, and as this, and as this. And I could say as northern shoveler, as black-crowned night heron, but also as this, light splashing onto my backyard, or as this, as sitting in front of my desk. and seeing, little figures on my computer screen. It's revealing itself to me as this enlightenment, as this always here. So these objects show up. I don't want to make too much out of this, because right now I'm pointing to all these things that appear. But the things that appear, as we know, they seem to come, they seem to go. But reality is showing itself to us. It appears to us as those things that come and go. We can be right here just with this. This is enlightenment. This is the thing we overlook, because again, we do get caught up in the things. We get caught up in the northern shoveler. What is that? You see the group of birds out there. What is that? And we might say wood ducks or northern shoveler. But what is that? When wood duck or northern shoveler is no longer there, what is that? Well, that's thus. That's what's always here. It's always here. And we can see that. We can realize that if we stop looking for it. If we stop making a thing out of it that's missing, that I need to go get, and then we start pursuing it like those car keys, the glasses, like the Sora. If we just let reality reveal itself, right there it is. Right there enlightenment is. It's right here. I say right there, it's actually right here. Right here for us to experience. So I'm going to stop my talk at that point. If people have questions or comments, I welcome them.
Well, your stories made me think of a story I experienced. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. I'm letting myself right now.
So one day at the Zen Center with Katagiri, we were having a work day, and then we took a tea break. And so I'm making tea for myself, and Katagiri standing next to me. And I went into this fantasy about Katagiri asking me, what is it? And me making some profound answer, And my fantasy was interrupted by Katagiri coming up to me and saying, what is that? Pointing to my tea. So I started to explain to him, it was my tea and I was putting cream in it. And he looked totally disgusted and walked away. So that was, kind of the same as those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's interesting because like John Tarrant, we start to spin out a little bit, thinking about, well, how am I going to respond to this moment? Like when it arises, how am I going to respond to it? And we start preparing ourselves for it, and we start telling ourselves, this is how I'll do it. This is the right way to respond to this situation. And yet I can't help but call to mind the koan that David Shaw had read on a Wednesday night a little while ago now, where the koan was called Appropriate Response. And I think basically teachers just said, what is the true nature of reality? And the teacher replied, appropriate response. So that's really what is required in that moment. But yeah, we'll spend this time trying to come up with the appropriate response. And we make a thing out of that appropriate response. So I'm sorry that he looked disgusted. At least he didn't tweak your nose.
Well, it was, at the time it did feel like a big tweak,
Well, that's good. That's good. It brings you right back here. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, I thank you for your talk, Steve. First of all, appreciate it. Yeah, I know reality is always showing up here and now, and it's always available. But sometimes I've noticed I don't always want reality here and now. I want something else, or I think I do anyway. And maybe you could say a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure I can. So yeah, you're right. Sometimes we think we don't want reality. That reality is something that we would prefer wasn't showing up right now.
Right.
That's where we can ask ourselves, what are we doing against? So there's something that you feel is missing, and perhaps it's quietude, or it's non-suffering, or it's something like that. And, as I said, what we do with something like that, and we feel it's not here, reality right now is showing up as pain and suffering. We become obsessed with this thing that we create, and then that becomes really the shape of how we experience reality. Reality doesn't change itself, but how it is that we understand it changes pretty drastically. So reality itself isn't one way or another. It's the way that it's appearing to us, or it seems to be this way, it seems to be that way. And then based on those appearances, we ascribe positivity or negativity to that. And then from that, and we do this all, I'm saying, and then from that we do this, but it doesn't show up that way. It shows up with often just our response. Like, I don't like this. That might be the first thing that pops up. We might not even know what it is at first that we think it is we don't want. But reality is just always here, so it'll show up, these appearances, they kind of come and go. So as I'm sure you're aware, Mike, when it seems sometimes where you're thinking, I really don't want to be with reality, or, however it is you're thinking, like reality is something I don't want to be facing right now. Again, what you're talking about are the appearances that are coming and going. And one thing we can say about that, at least with some certainty, and it can be a comfort, is to know that those things that arise that appear, that they go away. So when we're in moments where we feel distressed, we at least have comfort knowing that, that this will pass. Of course, if you hang too tightly to that, then there's a stress you could also get when there's something that's here that is pleasurable, or that you want to have, knowing that that too will go away. So we can hang too tightly to that. But yeah, that's really all I can say is it's always reality. But reality is what I think you're talking about perhaps is it's not exactly reality. It's just the way that it's showing up right now that brings with it, your response of, like I said, it might have an evaluation that this is a negative thing and I don't like it. And it might actually be painful, whatever it is that you're experiencing. But just be with this, and whatever's showing up arises, it will pass too.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Mike. Well, great. Thank you for being here this morning.